What's up, y'all? Primitive Mycology here again. Let's talk about grain prep today. Grain prep is one of the absolute most important parts of this process. Without good grain prep, no matter how good your genetics or how good your sterile culture work is, you will never get successful flushes. Bacterial spawn probably would fruit, but it's not going to fruit well, and it's not going to be very long before it completely contaminates. So if we hope to be proficient by any means, we need not perfect grain prep, but proficient. So number one, there's many ways to prep grain. There's people that do no soak, no simmer, pre-measured amount of grain, pre-measured amount of water, throw it in a jar or a bag, pressure cook. That does work with things like millet, but I personally don't think it's ever going to be as good as a properly fermented grain that has been boiled to full hydration, strained. That way you're kind of cleaning it at the same time, washing away all the nasty, because no grain is perfect, it's all dirty. I don't care how clean you think it is, it's dirty. And you know, then there's people that will only soak overnight in the vessel, let it absorb what it will, give it a shake, pressure cook. I prefer to take the longer route and ferment for 24 hours. As you see, there's some 5-gallon buckets right here. A couple of big, couple of turkey burners and 2 big pressure cookers. I ferment 24 hours. I'll be draining this after I remove the very few sunflower seeds that are in the bird seed mixture, and then the oats that float to the top, those are bad grains. They'll still grow mushrooms, but I just remove anything that floats to the top. But yeah, 24 hours, so let it soak. It will start fermenting on its own. Let it do its thing. Drain, boil. After a 24-hour soak, I find that oats, they take about 5 to 10 minutes of boiling if you soak them 24 hours. If you don't soak them 24 hours, if it's only 12 hours or just overnight, 8 hours while you sleep, then you need about 20 to 25 minutes to hydrate them properly. But I do the longer soak, so it works out pretty good. I also use a specific bird seed that is only millet, milo, which is sorghum, and wheat berries. You always find a few sunflower seeds, but very, very few. Out of 20 pounds, you might have, I don't know, a quarter of a pound. They're not supposed to be in there, but it happens when they make, because that bird seed company probably makes hundreds of different styles. Anyways, now we have soaked for 24 hours, 24 actual hours, not overnight. Don't confuse that. I'm going to skim the bad grains off the top, strain it, and get it in these pots and get cooking. So let's do it. Those are actually pretty good. A few bad ones. Oh yeah, we're gonna go ahead and use those. Okay. Let's just keep it simple. Real simple. We like simple. The more variables we remove, the easier our process is. Okay. Oh yeah, look at that. Perfect. You can see, I don't know if you can see with the distance of the camera, but there is still always going to be just a couple sunflower seeds in there. A couple will not hurt you. Sunflower seeds do have some antifungal properties, but you know, a handful in 20 pounds of grain or 40 pounds of grain is not going to make one bit of difference. That mycelium, if you have good healthy genetics, especially like oyster mushrooms, that mycelium is insanely strong. Paul Stamets grew oyster mushrooms on a recliner, literally a recliner. Just, that's mind-boggling. So they don't really care if there's sunflower seeds, but some more picky mycelium don't do as well if there's a bunch, but a handful in a pot like this ain't gonna make any difference. And as you fill it up with water, the last few will float to the top. That's one of the great things is sunflower seeds float. And you want, like, if you're using a 1 gallon pot in the house, you probably want like 1.5 to 2 inches above your grain of water. Doing, you know, a 23-quart pressure cooker. I mean, we're about 3/4 full. I go about like 2 inches of water above, because this stuff already soaked up water all night. So it's not like it's going to absorb that much more. And here with our oats, we catch as much as we can as we pour off the water. because our oats look pretty good, I just went ahead and let them all ride. Sometimes, depending on where you buy your oats, you might get a bunch of like kind of black, screwed up ones, fucked up ones, whatever. I always throw them out, but really, I mean, the mycelium, the mushroom, probably eat anything, you know. And then you might think that's a lot of grain, and it is. This is about, I think, almost 40 pounds of grain or something like that, hydrated. I'm teaching a class in one of the neighboring counties, a cultivation class, which is why it's been so long since I've put a video up. I'm still going to do the giveaway. I'll think of a question before this video is over, and whoever can answer it in the comments, well, I'll send you an agar plate. The first 2 people. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to think of a question for you. I will also be adding 10 pounds of popcorn to this at the end, but that'll be cooked separately, as popcorn's got a different boil time than oats or the birdseed. Oats and birdseed can be done together, but popcorn takes about twice as long to hydrate, so you don't want to put that in your pot unless you want a ton of burst grains that will, you know, cause you some problems later on. A few burst grains is not a big deal, but a bunch of burst grains will cause you bacterial problems, from my experience anyway. So now, got everything filled up. We'll go ahead and get these hooked up here. And hydrated, this should all make, I think I should end up with about a total of 60 or 70 pounds of grain, completely hydrated, adding the popcorn, something like that. Because most generally grains will hold, depending on the grain, I think popcorn, some people say popcorn will hold like 50 to 60%. That is absolutely not true. There is a formula that you can do to see what percentage your grain is hydrated in. That is, you take grain that you've got hydrated at its, you know, whatever stage, and you're going to take 10 grams, throw it in the microwave for 45 seconds. When it's done, open the door and let the steam out. Wait a minute, 45 more seconds. You keep doing that until it stops, until, you know, you think it's getting close to being completely dehydrated, and then you take what was 10 grams, you throw it on your scale, and say that now you're down to 6 grams. Well, that means that you were at 40% hydration. You know, so, I mean, and that works all throughout. As long as you start with 10 grams or if you start with 100 grams, you know, it's gonna, you can find out. The most I've ever got popcorn to hold was about 43, 45%. 60%, that's people that probably don't know how to actually find the percentage of hydration. Or they're completely overhydrating their grain, which is common, very common. And then they wonder why they have, you know, problematic spawn where 2 out of 10 jars is going bad or 5 out of 20. That's why, you know, popcorn should never hold more than 45% at the very maximum. I prefer to be around 40. With things like oats, you can get 35. That's pushing it. Birdseed, 30. That's pushing it. Most definitely, overhydrated grain will cause you more problems than under-sterilized grain. And I know this because I had no mentor, and I had to learn from literature and practice. Several years of that, and you actually know what you're doing. You've never been handheld and walked through an entire process, so you actually were forced to learn not just the process, but what causes problems, you know, and the actual solutions, not just something handed to you. And it's been a very, very tough road, which is why I make these videos. I would love to see everybody have an easier time learning about mycology than me. If I were not so stubborn, I would have quit long ago, but I refuse to quit, and here we are, guys. So I'm gonna pause this while I get these fired up, and once we get up to a simmer, I'll restart the video. And that's something too you want to think about, is it's called soak and simmer. If you bring it to a boil, that's okay. Quickly lower your heat back to a simmer. You will overcook your grains or burn what's on the bottom. You can stir constantly, and you need to stir anyway, but on a high heat boiling, you're really not doing yourself a service. You're going to get a better grain by simmer. Yes, it might take 3 more minutes. What is 3 minutes as opposed to all the time it's going to take to bag this grain, all the time it's going to take to inoculate this grain, and all the time it's going to take to throw it away and do it all again? Why not take the extra 3 minutes? Why not hydrate your grain properly, right? That's what I'm here for. We'll be back. Okay, we're back again for a moment. One of my previous videos, I talk about azomite. This is basically an all-organic fertilizer that is mined primarily in Utah. This is beneficial. There's a lot of people in mycology that use this. There is no reason to use very much. I do 1 teaspoon for a pot half this size. So I'll be doing 1 tablespoon per pot, 2 tablespoons of gypsum. You don't have to do this, but I've noticed some pretty good benefits doing it like this. You don't want to add this dry. It needs to dissolve and absorb into your grain. So let's go ahead and add this. And if you look over here, you can see I've got this wooden stake that I use for a stir stick for this, because you don't have to be sterile at this point. You are we're literally just cooking grain. You know, that's why you can do this part outside if you're doing a bunch. You know, why heat up the house and put in all kind of utilities? And that little bit of smoke you see is because I just replaced my burners, my outdoor burners, and that's some of the paint that comes on it burning off, which makes no difference either. But again, for a full 23-quart pot full of grain, 1 tablespoon of azomite, 2 tablespoons of gypsum. That's all the more you need. There's no reason to put any more, because any more than that would take months and months and months to be used by the mycelium, in which you will have already gotten harvest and composted the fruiting block or the cake, whatever you want to use. And I mean, that's it. It's that simple. Keep stirring your grain. Right now, the birdseed is just starting to have bubbles come to the top, but it's not boiling. It's just because there's so much in there and so much water, air is moving through. More or less, this is where we're at until the end. Once in a while, you're gonna pull up some grain, check to see if it's hydrated. After you do this long enough, you can look at it, and then I do a bite test. The grain should be al dente, to the tooth. You should be able to bite through it and visually look at it, and you can see clearly if it still is dry. It'll have like chalky white spots in it. If it's hydrated, it'll be like translucent. That's how simple it is. I'll be back when I get to that point, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so now we're at that point. I shut the heat off. I'm gonna pull a little basket of grains, give you guys an idea of what a hydrated grain looks like. Once you've seen hundreds and thousands of grains that are properly hydrated, it's very easy to tell. Before I even do the tooth test, you can see very clearly the grain will look very translucent and swollen. Okay, so here we are. You can see it's super translucent. It's very, very hot to kind of get an idea. It looks swollen and like, translucent, like almost see-through. These wheat berries are always done first, so you got to check the milo as well. But see, it bites real easy and smashes. And you see there's that little bit of like chalky white. That water's hot enough that it needs to sit in there for about 2 or 3 more minutes. That looks wonderful. And then the milo, you can see, looks like all plump, shiny, and again translucent instead of like that chalky color. Bites in half very easily, and all but just a tiny bit again. That means that the grain cooked evenly. We're good to go. We're going to let it sit in there 2 or 3 more minutes, maybe 5. Not going to hurt it because the heat's off. We're going to let it absorb the last bit of moisture it will. And in the meantime, we'll check the oats. Now the oats are really easy to tell because they look really like chalky when they first come out, and they look really dense. As they hydrate, they will start again looking translucent, swollen, and again to the tooth. The oats are not near as fun to bite into because they have a husk on them. But you open this up, and there's still a little bit of white in there. You can see that little chalky bit. Try to get it where you can see. It's just a little tiny bit. That means they just need to soak in that water that was just simmering for about 5 more minutes, kind of like the birdseed. And at that point, we're done. We'll strain them off and lay them out on these sawhorses and in these trays See you in 2 hours. You know, you let them air dry, stir them about every 30 minutes. And when they're no longer like soaking wet, little bit of moisture on the outside, but little, that's when they're ready to bag. And if you fold your bags right and get them folded well, it doesn't matter if they sit for a day before you sterilize them, they're not going to dry out. You leave your bags open or you fold them half-ass, they will dry out. You know, there's going to be far more bags than I can put in both these pressure cookers at once. You know, this will take at least 2 runs, maybe 3 to sterilize it all. But folded well, it won't make a difference at all. Anyways, I'll come back when I'm laying it out, show you guys kind of the process. Okay, so we're back. The grain has all been run through a strainer, and we got a big old fucking bunch up here on the sawhorses, and we got lots underneath. This would take about an hour, hour and a half to be fit to put in a bag. Again, you want to turn it about every half an hour. When you do smaller batches, it's obviously the time for it to be fit to put in a bag or a jar is going to be a lot sooner. But when you've got this amount, you're looking at, you know, a little bit of time. But, you know, that's it. I'll bring you guys back for bagging it up. When you're doing a lot like this, there's no point in weighing every single bag. I weigh 1 bag, do 10 more, eyeball them, you know, because the bags are the same size. If you can't eyeball that they're close to the same, you know, within a couple ounces, you should get glasses. Anyways, and then about every 10 bags, I'll weigh 1 and just check, make sure I'm not too far off. But if this is something that you're going to list and sell, then you obviously need to be on point with the weight. That way, no one is ever shorted. You know, if anything, be a couple ounces over, or, you know, I go by the pounds. So, you know, 5 pounds would usually be like 5.1 or 5.2. But you get the gist, you know, for yourself. 2 pounds plus or minus a couple ounces is not going to make a difference when you spawn it to bulk. Now, someone that paid for it deserves to get every penny worth of what they paid for. So then you've got to be a little more meticulous. But anyways, you know, this will probably end up being about 70 pounds of grain. And again, there's still 10 pounds of popcorn to run through. And I'll probably run that while I'm bagging this and just add it evenly to the bags when it's done. You know, I mean, there's so many ways to do this. This is just one. Anyways, y'all, this is it for now. I'll be back in a minute. Or I guess an hour and a half. Okay, guys, we're back. I know I said that I was going to show some of the bagging, but I think everybody knows how to scoop grain out of a tray or off a large piece of plywood and put it in bags. Here we have 25, pretty well 2.5. Some of them are closer to 3-pound bags. So I was about right, about 70 some pounds of grain, and I haven't added the popcorn yet. I ran out of daylight today, so I'm just going to fold these up, cook the 10 pounds of popcorn tomorrow, and I will add it to the tops of these bags as evenly as possible. And I have found that with grain, pretty much any grain will work. I really like using brown rice, but it's just not that efficient when I'm doing large bags and large cooks. Sometimes it tends to want to overcook a little bit. When you're doing smaller runs in like pint jars or quart jars, it does exceptionally well. I really love brown rice. But doing larger runs, you know, oats can handle an absolute beating.
and still perform exceptional, but they lack some nutrition, and because of their shape, they don't colonize quite as quickly, for me anyway. Maybe some people have better luck with oats. So what I do is I mix the small grain size of like Milo and millet allows for super fast colonization and lots of inoculation points when you spawn to bulk, which is rather beneficial. Also, you know, Milo has got a lot. Sorry, the porch light kicked off. Milo has got quite a bit of nutrition. And then the popcorn is absolutely loaded with nutrition. And it's a larger grain, so you don't get as many inoculation points, but it has its own benefits. Also, it retains pretty well the most amount of moisture. Maybe, oh, I can't think of the name of it right now. Not oats, not wheat, rye berries. Rye berries may hold a little more moisture per pound. Per grain, popcorn definitely takes it, but regardless, a mix of the Milo, millet, and wheat berries with oats, and then the popcorn cooked separately. It's like a smash bag is kind of what I call it. It's got a little bit of everything. That seems to do the best for me because it has all the benefits of everything, and a wide array of nutrition, you know, where I am constantly changing up my agar recipe with different nutrients batch to batch, purposely to keep the mycelium constantly developing different enzymes to digest different materials. That way, no matter what I put it on, it's going to colonize quickly and fruit well. Also, it helps with senescence. Anyways, let's get out of that conversation. But like I say, you know, pretty much about 70 pounds, maybe 75 here of grain. And it'll bump up to 80, maybe a little more. I think there was 6.5 or 7 pounds of dry popcorn, which hydrated should be between 10 and 12. If I'm super lucky, 13, but I don't really care about a pound, not with this amount. Anyways, this is all grain for the mushroom cultivation workshop that I'll be teaching in the neighboring county. You know, it's $5 entry. You know, people can learn quite a bit about mushrooms and, you know, the basics of cultivation, and everyone is going to leave with either a bag of grain spawn or a fruiting block that could be used as spawn or just fruited directly. More or less, every one of these bags is going to make 2 or 3 fruiting blocks, and maybe a couple people that can answer a question or something can get, you know, a full bag of grain to do what they want with. Anyways, the question here for the giveaway is, what is the difference between a monokaryon and a dikaryon? Just the basic difference. Anybody that can answer that, the first 2 people, I will send you a colonized agar plate. I've got some shiitake plates that are about ready, some chestnut plates about ready. Pioppino I just did in a plate run with to make spawn with, and I've got literally about 100 gourmet cultures So if anybody's not okay with one of those, if you win, you just have to give me a little lead time and I can pull a transfer off another plate for you. Anyways, whoever can answer that, first two of y'all, I'll send you a plate. So, you know, that's basically it. Add the popcorn evenly and get these bags folded up nice. Pack them in the pressure cookers, and 3 hours at 15 psi. Let them cool in the pressure cooker. You know, you don't want to take them out hot because they will suck in air. Dirty air, you know, obviously. If you wanted to put them in front of your flow hood, they would probably be okay, but I've found the best thing to do is just leave them in the PC. Let them sit at least overnight. I like to let them sit in there until they're totally vacuumed down and I can touch the outside of the pressure cooker, which with all the mass in there is usually the next afternoon. You know, I pull them out, put them directly to the impulse sealer, and then store them for, you know, inoculation run. Anyways, guys, this is Primitive Mycology. Ha! I can't even say it right. I'm checking out. Peace. Oh, and here we're back. Primitive Mycology. You guys know I said I'd be back in a minute. This is actually the following day. After the grain was bagged, set overnight, and I got two 23-quart Prestos loaded. When you make the right size bags, you can fit a substantial amount. The 2 to 2.5 pound bags pack in there really, really nicely. And I ended up with 11 bags each. So that's 22 2 to 2.5 pound bags at a time, you know. 3 hours at 15 psi. See how much that rocker on the Presto is rocking? That's too much. So pay attention, y'all. That right there is too much. You're wasting water, and the more you vent that pressure, the less that pressure is doing. You need to try to keep that pressure, so you want less rocking. If you're rocking like crazy, more of your pressure is dissipating than you're keeping. And you're also wasting your water. So if you want to do a long run to get some, you know, actually sterile grain, you probably don't want to have it rocking like that. So we gotta back her off just a wee bit. And just this simple, we're gonna crank her back just a hair. I got her dialed in fairly decent. You see the T-foul, which, let me tell you, with a T-foul and a Presto sitting side by side, the T-foul is the better pressure cooker. I don't care what any of you say. I have both, and I'm using them together. Have been for a while. The T-foul is a better pressure cooker. You can argue all you want, but I highly doubt that a single one of you, well, I'm sure some of you maybe, are running this much grain 3 times in a row. Maybe, but I'm sure that probably not many of you anyway have run the two side by side. Also note that when you back off your heat a little bit, it's going to take a few minutes to regulate that temperature and slow that rocker down. If you go cranking and cranking and cranking thinking, oh, it's not, the pressure ain't coming down, I'm wasting air pressure, you know, I'm wasting pressure, I'm wasting water, and keep cranking it down, you're going to end up 20 minutes later at 10 psi or some ignorance like that. Just be patient and pay attention. Once you get it dialed in after the initial, expansion of pressure, once you get her dialed in, you can literally just walk away from it and forget about it. Come back in 3 hours, or 2 more hours. It usually takes me about 45 minutes. Here, we'll bump this one down just a touch. Usually takes me about 45 minutes to get them completely dialed in, and I do a 3-hour run on grain. If you don't overhydrate your grain, you could do 3.5. Depending on what kind of grain I'm using, sometimes I'll run 3.5. It does pretty well. Just make sure that you're using a 2-inch carriage bolt on your trivet. That way you can hold enough water. With a 2-inch carriage bolt, I can hold like 3.25 quarts of water. If you run your pressure cooker out of water, well, you defeated your purpose. Look at that. Look at the T-valve. See how it's starting to not run steady there? How it's just burping off, burping off, burping off. That's what you want. That Presto is still a little bit on the high side, but it'll come down here. I'm noticing it's slowing down little by little. Once it slows down to just a little rock, and you know, just that's when you're dialed in. At this point, if your pressure cooker's doing that, your heat's too high. And I can tell you this just from way too much experience. See? Good. Look, now it's almost staying flat. It's just rolling in a circle. We're getting close. And look at the T-valve. It's venting about just a little now, about every 3 seconds. That's dialed in right there. Again, the Presto's still a little too high, but I think you get the drift. And if you notice with like the T-valve, it'll burp off 2 or 3 times in a row, fairly heavy, once every 10 or 15 seconds, but otherwise it's about every 3 seconds. Again, with large burners like this, it takes a little bit to get them dialed in, but once you do, you're good. All right, let's back this off just a touch more. It's looking pretty good now, though. And look, we're pegged right at about 16, and that's too high. This pressure cooker ain't meant to run that. Yes, you could put, tape a quarter to the top of your weight, but I'll tell you now that 17 PSI does you absolutely zero more good than 15. Anything above 8 to 10 PSI, and you're just looking at a small difference in time. So keep that in mind. A lot of people swear by the quarter on the weight, and really it's a waste. Back that off a little more, staying a little on the hot side. But you guys get the drift here. I'll not waste no more of your time. You can see it here. Again, I still favor the T-valve. $40 cheaper, and I've honestly had better luck with it. Anyways, y'all make your own decision. I personally am not ultra concerned with what you do, because everybody has a different way of doing things. Although our goal is the same, the way we get there does not have to be, there is no right way to do anything. There's a way not to do something, but there's no guideline. Like, experience is your guideline. If anybody's trying to tell you there's only one way to do things, instantly disregard every single word they say after that, because that is complete ignorance, and they don't actually know what the hell they're doing at all. I could tell you 10 different ways to prep grain, 10 different variations. I could tell you 3 different ways to sterilize it. Actually, probably more like 5 when you get into further variations. Again, you know, this is something that is developed over time based on the equipment you have combined with your experience and the best available knowledge you have. Sterile technique is sterile technique regardless. Yes, there are mistakes that should always be avoided, but for the most part, if anyone's telling you that you're doing something wrong, as long as you're not passing your hands over an open container or active mycelium, or you are absolutely contaminating something, just because your technique's a little different doesn't make it wrong. It makes them ignorant for telling you it is. Now, that's not to say that you're not doing something very wrong, because there are instances, but just bear in mind, anyone that tells you that there's only one way to do things, disregard everything they say after that and check out a couple books or talk to a few other people. There's so many ways to do this successfully. This is just one. Anyways, y'all have a good one. Peace.